sure that there are public hearings coming next session, that the legislatures all have an input. This bill, this information still, once it passes, still has to be debated on the floor. It has to be debated in committee. And it's very important that we do that, because early voting it's going to be free, accessible, no long lines, and people will be able to come out to vote. If sometimes people have 2 and 3 jobs and they can't vote. As far as, and that's something that I would make sure, even as a candidate, that I get the word out. And the other thing for the voter checklist, it still has to be updated all the time, and we need to really help the town clerks and the registrars to keep that updated, and the technology has to be there. So we have to spend the money in the budget to help the towns and the city clerks and the cities to spend that money, because a lot of them don't have it in their budget. So we have to be able to help them out.
Thank you, Hilda. Next, Stephanie Thomas.
And I just want to let Laura know, we can't hear your alarm, because I noticed.
Sorry, I was responding to your question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So no excuse absentee ballots or absentee balloting in general. Although we couldn't testify, Rep. Santiago and I sat through that 7-hour public hearing on Friday while that very issue was debated. And I look forward to continuing that conversation. A lot of people keep asking, do we still need absentee balloting if we have early voting? And I think the answer is yes. Anything that appeals to more voters is better. But the answer I'll give to probably a few questions today, we have to avoid top-down instead of a bottom-up. Every single registrar I've spoken to, and I've spoken to quite a few, have said 2 things. 1, no more unfunded mandates. And 2, people are retiring in droves at an alarming rate that I find alarming. So we have to bring them to the table and figure out what type of system can actually be implemented. And with regards to checklists, we have to talk to them too, because there are very practical concerns.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Next round, we have Eloisa asking the question.
Thank you, Steve. So we'll start with Alder Brackeen. The focus right now is, of course, on our state convention and then the primary. But why do you think you're the strongest candidate to win in the general election?
Thank you so much for the question. Well, as we all know, I am hailing from the city of New Haven, and historically, it has held one of the largest delegate counts in the region, probably top 4. I am coming in with the support of the mayor and the majority of the DTC. I've also encountered many other individuals across this state in terms of the delegates, town committee members, not so many delegates, but town committee members who are extremely supportive of the idea of ensuring that we have diversity at the table, and I bring that in many varied ways.
Thank you. I think it's Josh Elliott next.
I think just so alphabetical order. I'm sorry.
I think
you will go last. This round, you will go last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So a few reasons. I mean, first of all, I think that there's it's an aspect of work ethic. I do know a number of folk on this call have incredible work ethics. So I just know that what mine is particularly is that I give 100% to this work, and I devote myself entirely to it. I have built a lot of relationships with members of press across the state. And that's a big aspect of this. I mean, you want somebody who's not only going to be pushing for the policies that we all agree with, but you want somebody who's going to be able to appeal to a wide swath of voters. While I definitely come at this unashamedly a progressive Democrat, I have also been very clear with the public and with the people close to me is that, there is an aspect of learning that goes into this process, and that I have really devoted myself to working well with both moderate and conservative Dems, and being somebody who works across the aisle, which I think for some people on the left, that's toxic. But for a lot of people that recognize the long-term impacts of this work, you have to work with everybody, and especially in something like this. So I'm somebody who can both bridge both sides of the ideological divide in a campaign like this.
Thank you, State Representative. Senator Lesser, same question.
Yeah, thank you, Eloisa. I would just say this. I have been in the legislature for 14 years and I represent a purple district. I've had to run tough elections and defeat Republicans. We can talk about all we want about what we want to do. But the most important thing is that we keep a strong Democratic slate in office, and that we win. I've also had the privilege of working very closely with Secretary Merrill on every major voting reform of the last 12 years. So on day one, I would be able to do the job. I know the Office of Secretary of State inside and out. And I have a long record of passing hundreds of bills into law and know how to work with legislative leaders to get things done. But we just don't have the luxury of being able to take our time. Unfortunately, this is the most important job in Connecticut. And I wish that weren't the case, but the crisis in democracy is really real.
Thank you. Representative Santiago.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Eloisa. Thank you for the question. I feel that it's time for a voice like mine to lead the conversation on voting rights. I represent underserved communities, the places most needed of representation, and I am also a community activist, and I do a lot of community outreach. It's not just sitting at the table or on your desk, behind your desk, carrying out policy. You have to be able to work with the legislators, you have to be able to work with leadership, and you have to be able to go into the community. No matter how the community is at that point, you have to go into the Black, brown, and white communities. I always feel that I would bring to the table thousands of votes in this election with the Latino vote. And I also say that smaller towns do count, and the mid-sized cities do also count. It's not just the big cities. So I think, to me, that's important. And you have to be able to work as a team with the registrars and the town clerks in order to carry your vision or your ideas. There's no I in team, and we have to be working as a team. And also communication is so important to them. So that's what I would be bringing to the table. And I feel that I would be able to do that job.
Thank you so much. Representative Thomas.
Thank you. I've had this weird background. I grew up extremely poor, like no food and electricity poor. My career has me working with the wealthiest philanthropists in the world, really. And my work straddles both, my work in the nonprofit sector straddles both of that. And I think for people on this call, most people know the race here with Norwalk, Wilton, and Westport. All of those constituencies are so very different. And the joke used to be that I would go to houses with Republican lawn signs, "Are my opponent," and knock there too and say, "I'd have to represent you." I think people are sick of politics. And I think my message of truth and listening to every single person and treating them as an individual has stood me in good stead in these races, and I think in this race as well. I think I said in my opening that I bring my heart and my mind, and I don't say that lightly. This is not a job for me, this is a passion, and I treat it as a passion, and I think people respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. And finally, Director Bond.
Thank you so much. This is a testament of the fact that I have never ran for office, and I am so grateful for having an amazing team that believes in the vision that I have been able to share these past few months and really demonstrating a strong fundraising quarter. For the last 20 years, I have served in public service because my childhood experience did serve as that motivator. And I've actually, for the past 2 years, been at the front lines, showing how government can work for the people. Despite all of the government at the federal level and confusion and misinformation that was happening in the midst of COVID, the city of New Haven was able to overcome that and be one of the leading cities in the state around high rates of immunization rates and it being able to effectively have education campaigns. And it's important that we're not just talking about leadership from the top down, but utilizing trusted messengers. And I have done that. And government is about really meeting people where they are. And I've done that my entire career. And I am grateful for that opportunity. And I hope that I am also able to gain your support to get me to Hartford.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. I want to take just a second just to explain there's a method to our madness in terms of which candidates we're speaking to in what order. We're doing it all alphabetically, but the first time we started, number 1 in the alphabet, then we moved to number 2 in the alphabet, then number 3 in the alphabet, and we'll keep doing it that way.
Okay.
And just keeping the cycle. Okay, I know that was confusing.
Thank you.
Representative Elliott will be the next as the third in the alphabet. I'll be asking my question to him, and then we'll follow alphabetically from Josh. We've appropriately given a lot of time to voting rights, ballot access. Secretary of State's office obviously has a lot of other important areas. Let's focus on business services that the office provides. Are there ways that you see that you as secretary would want to try to streamline any of those business interactions interfacing?
Yeah, so my background is interesting in the fact that I'm taking over a business that's been around for 25 years, but then also opened up my own business. So I know what it's like to both work with a team that is very well ingrained, but then also creating a team and working with the state to create something new from the ground up, which was not the easiest to navigate, even as somebody who has that law degree and knows how to navigate the system. I still found it difficult to go to all these different places. And what you need to do is ensure that the office is not siloed, because the Secretary of the State's office can be a one-stop shop where if you have an idea, you go to the Secretary of State's office, you figure out how to get the EIN, what sort of agencies you need to go to make sure that you can run in a way that's not going to run afoul of any laws or of any agencies. I think part of that is going to be talking with whether it's lenders or people that do any sort of financial or business work to get them into a room to figure out what the problems are that they're having as well. But ultimately, everything should be flowing through the same place. And I know a big problem with that is the fact that agencies want to maintain power over their own separate domain. But the nice thing is that being a constitutional office, it should be a place that people feel comfortable allowing this place to emanate and push out where to make people go to.
Thank you. We'll go to Senator Lesser. Matt?
Yes, thank you, Tom. The Secretary of State's office is the first point of contact for anybody trying to do business in the state of Connecticut. And that is an incredibly important first touch for us. But we're really missing the boat. If you go to New York City's website, they have one website that you can go to for any small business to not only do business registrations, but also to get assistance, to get a business up and running, to navigate permits and licenses and tax filings and all the rest. But in Connecticut, it's all siloed between umpteen different state agencies, the Small Business Development Center, the Department of Economic and Community Development. It's been caught up in politics. And the next Secretary of State needs to work out that politics, needs to figure out how to sort this out, because we are losing market share, we are losing opportunities when it's cumbersome to do business here. And this is an incredible opportunity. The other thing I would just point out is the need to get accurate data on Connecticut's economy, because we get an incredible amount of data through business filings. But when I talk to economists, including one at UConn, who pointed out that we could be doing so much more to marry different state agency databases and get that data, so we know where Connecticut's economy is doing well and where we need to provide a little bit more support. So I think there's a lot we can do there.
Thank you. Appreciate that answer. Representative Santiago, Hilda, you're up next.
Okay, so the business unit is a big part of the Secretary of the State. Just January 10th, they just launched a link to the Department of Economic and Community Development, so that when you're looking for resources, it will link you to the DECD. If you're looking for loans and grants and all other kinds of information. I also think that they're already doing that. They're already streamlining that. So it's like a one-stop shopping. We're looking, what I would add to that is that the Secretary of the State should be going and meeting people at the Chamber of Commerce on the local level as much as her schedule would provide. They should also be working with manufacturers, working with small businesses, and minority businesses and women-owned businesses, and have a forum every 6 months or so to let folks know what type of business dealings the Secretary of the State does. The Secretary also does authentication of legal papers. They also do the Justice of the Peace, and they also keep a list of public hearings and meetings throughout the state. So there's a lot of other stuff that does include the Secretary of the State, but the business unit, they do have a business unit, and that means that there should be more community outreach working with that office.
Thank you. Same question to Representative Thomas. Stephanie?
Thank you. As a small business owner and a consultant, time is literally money. So I understand that just having a platform that works and provides a one-stop shop, such as what Rep. Santiago just referenced, really to me respects the role that businesses play in Connecticut. And I think that platform has actually done a great job. I've said it once, I'll say it again, unfunded mandates. There are a lot of things that are low-hanging fruit that the Secretary's office could do right now without bringing other agencies, and creating a huge fiscal note. Right now, we are the portal. We have all of that data, whether it's women-owned businesses, minority-owned, number of startups, veteran-owned. And I think the Secretary could use that data a little more actively, proactively. We can drive recommendations to other agencies and the committees of cognizance in the legislature. We can use it to push out information to those businesses about programs that could help them build their businesses. We can also convene groups to make sure that, especially coming out of COVID, that every business has what they need to continue to thrive here in Connecticut.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Director Bond, Ritza, you're up.
Thank you. This is something that I have given a lot of thought, actually. I currently license businesses in the city of New Haven and in my prior role as well in the city of Bridgeport. And I saw firsthand a lot of small businesses just not surviving the COVID-19 pandemic. And so for me, supporting a robust economy through helping small businesses by forming and reforming, I should say, because our Lieutenant Governor, when she was a Secretary of the State, had a small business unit. And so I aim to reinstate a small business unit to ensure that we are supporting and being able to provide information. And again, being a true one-stop shop for businesses at large throughout the state. I also envision myself to ensuring that we continue to support and making sure that the Secretary of State office has autonomy over the funding resources that come in. So I will be also working through that effort if elected as Secretary of the State in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Alderman Brackeen. Daryl, on streamlining business services.
Thank you. I think one thing that needs to be acknowledged is that Secretary Merrill absolutely brought this business division to the 21st century, and she should be commended for that. There are many improvements that I'd like to propose as a small business owner, and I self-impose, we call ourselves a serial entrepreneur, my wife and I. We all know a small wine brand label, but in trying to start this company, we found many hurdles, like Representative Elliott aforementioned. There's a lot of things that could be consolidated in a one-stop shop in a way that makes sense. So what I'm proposing is that we reinstate the small business division unit in actually having a mobile fleet. in which we divide up into a county system to provide access for folks in a present way through a mobile opportunity to engage with the Secretary of State's office in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce across the state, many of whom I've had relationships with because I have served as a nonprofit executive myself of a large multi-million-dollar operation and organization and staff. So it's vitally important that we have an individual in this role who's actually had the experience of bringing these types of initiatives to the table and to the forefront.
Thank you very much. Back to Steve.
Thank you. I'll start this round with questions in the Q&A. Question is, and we'll start with Senator Lesser for this round. If the constitutional amendment for no excuse absentee voting is defeated again, what would you see as the next step?
Well, first of all, Steve, we should not allow it to fail. The job of anybody running for office, in fact, the job of every Democrat in the state, is to make sure we let people know that early voting is on the ballot, that no excuse absentee will be on the ballot in 2 years. We've got to make sure that we pass these referendums. In New York State, people took it for granted that it was going to pass this past fall. And one guy, the Estee Lauder heir, spent money to defeat those referendums. We can't let that happen here. We've got to make sure that any of us running have to make that the centerpiece of the campaign. But the thing I'd like to focus on is passing a Connecticut Voting Rights Act. You know, we've been waiting on Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act nationally. That would be great. Unfortunately, the filibuster is preventing that from passing. So we need a state voting rights act so that a vote in Bridgeport and a vote in Stamford and a vote in Norwalk and a vote in Wilton all count the same, that we don't have longer lines in one municipality than another.
Thank you, Senator Lesser. Next, Representative Santiago. Please unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's a great question. The bill that we just, the SB 184 that we just heard on Friday is actually to change the state statute for no excuse absentee ballot for November 8th election. And after that, it's done. It's just to extend it because we never know what's going to happen in the winter time. The no excuse absentee ballot, it will take a while for it to get passed because it's a constitutional change that has to be done also, just like the no early has to be a constitutional change. That's why we only got the votes to do a referendum for this election for the no excuse absentee ballot. The state constitution is very specific, and that also has to be a referendum. I don't see that coming along for another maybe 4 years, maybe 6 years. But the most important thing is to have accessibility and the freedom to vote, and the no excuse will be the first step towards that. We are one of 6 states in the country that, with New Hampshire, that doesn't have early voting, and that has to be passed. As Connecticut is progressive, we are a very slow state when it comes to voting rights, and we have to make that available for our population as democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Santiago. Next, we have Representative Stephanie Thomas.
Thank you. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe I'm misreading the question, but the constitutional amendment that was defeated was for early voting in 2014, not no excuse absentee ballots. So that failed, bad language, bad education. So the way, and as you can see, it took so many years to get back on the ballot. I think the way to move forward is like with anything else, education. I have been working seemingly tirelessly to make sure the early voting ballot referendum passes by joining meetings and sending emails and speaking to community groups. And I think the more we can start doing that now ahead of the vote on the no excuse absentee ballots which has to happen in 2023 by the legislature so that it will appear on the ballot in 2024. The time to start that education is not in 2024. The time to start it is now. So that's what I would advocate that everyone do who cares about these issues. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and make sure we can get all of these measures across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you. Next director, Maritza Bond.
Thank you. I'm just going to be short and brief and say defeat is not an option. And I concur with my opponent about public education and setting an awareness campaign. It is very critical to make sure that people have the knowledge, because when people have the knowledge, then they have the autonomy